Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Broadband Breakfast Live Online for Wednesday, July 17th, 2024. Um, my name is Drew Clark, CEO and publisher of Broadband Breakfast, and very happy to welcome a hopefully exciting discussion, maybe controversial, we'll see, on crypto and the Republicans, right? And so we at Broadband Breakfast cover politics and technology, the intersection of the two. We focus on how infrastructure improvements makes lives better or enables better lives. And we also cover the issues and policies around net neutrality, privacy, including things like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. It's been a little bit cryptocurrency and the blockchain. It's been a little bit quieter on this front, at least our coverage over the past year. 2 years ago, there was lots and lots of interest and attention. And then as values fell a little bit, there was less. But when we were looking at the political conventions that are happening right now, the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee and the Democratic National Convention next month in Chicago, we were thinking about issues on which particular parties kind of claim an advantage or seek an advantage, and crypto was the one that stood out for us. And sure enough, there's been a lot of talk about crypto at the Republican National Convention. I'm really excited to be able to welcome our reporter, Joel Layton, who will give us a quick rundown on that topic at the convention just now. And of course, we've got a great panel of experts on crypto, blockchain, and decentralized currency to speak to us. But I also want to just highlight that, we do this event if this is your first time here, we do this event every week, every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time. Sometimes we talk about infrastructure, sometimes we talk about applications, sometimes we're talking about, one of these sort of deep in the bowels of technology policy. And we've got a special event coming up next week on the Universal Service Fund. And then in coming weeks, we'll be at the Democratic National Convention in August, as I've just mentioned. And we're also very excited to be gearing up for our next in-person event called Digital Infrastructure Investment. This is a subject we've done a conference on for the last 5-6 years. We're very, very excited to have this next one in Washington on September 19th. And later in the program, I'll put a link to that in the chat. But for now, let's get into this topic after a quick thank you to the sponsors of Broadband Breakfast. We would not be able to do this free programming without them. They include Utopia Fiber, Comcast, SmartWave Technologies, Ookla, Wesco, Coos Systems, the Institute for Local Self-Reliances, Community Broadband Networks Initiative, the California Emerging Technology Fund, G-Fiber for Google Fiber, Broadband Now, Tirana Wireless, WISPA, Broadband Without Boundaries, and NCTA, the Internet and Television Association. Thank you to our sponsors. Well, with that, let's go ahead and open up our view. I'm going to introduce our panelists briefly, and then we'll hear from our reporter, Joel Layton, who is, as I say, on the ground in Milwaukee. Joel is a reporter with Broadband Breakfast, and he's studied journalism at Brigham Young University and is very interested in the intersection of politics and technology, including how broadband policy impacts people's lives. And we're, again, very excited to hear from him about some of the stories that he's written in the last 2 days with a strong focus on crypto, given how important it is there in this discussion of technology policy. We'll hear from Joel just now. He'll be followed by Jennifer Schlupp, who is the Director of Financial Regulation Studies at the Cato Institute Center for Monetary and Financial Alternatives. And Jennifer was with us at a previous hybrid in-person online event, and happy to have you back to update us on what's happened in the world of cryptocurrency in the last 2 years. She testifies frequently before Congress, including before the Senate Commerce and on Banking, Housing and Urban Affairs and before the U.S. House Committee on Financial Services. And prior to joining Cato, she was a director in the Department of Enforcement at the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA. So she's very, very knowledgeable on this topic. Thank you for being back with us, Jennifer. We're going to hear next from Paul Jossi. Paul is a principal attorney at Jossi PLLC, and there he specializes in decentralized capital raises. Okay, so ICOs, initial coin offerings. His commentary on crypto has been featured in CoinDesk, National Review, Daily Caller, and many others, and was formerly an adjunct fellow for cryptocurrency and crowdfunding at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. He's working on a book right now on the interplay of crypto and American culture and politics. That sounds fascinating, Paul. And then batting cleanup will be Sarah Sarah, I guess, Lamb. Thank you for giving both names to us. She's a senior fellow at the Technology Policy Institute and has presented research to the Western Economic Association Telecommunications Policy Research Conference, provided witness testimony to the Senate Commerce Committee Subcommittee on Communications, Technology, Innovation, and the Internet. And she's co-authored a work on Northwest Journal of Technology and Intellectual Property, which I'm a co-author of. So Sarah, great to have you back. Tom Hazlett and Sarah and myself worked at the Information Economy Project some years back. So that paper came out of that, but she's done other writing too, Berkeley Technology Law Journal and other peer-reviewed journals. And Dr. O completed her PhD in economics from George Mason University and holds a JD from Scalia Law School at George Mason University, as well as a BS in Management Sciences and Engineering from Stanford. So Sarah, thanks for being back with us here. Excited to hear from you. So let's turn over to you, Joel. Tell us a little bit about what the vibe is like in Milwaukee, particularly with reference to this issue, crypto.
Okay, thank you, Drew. I'm in one of the RNC halls at the moment, so if it's a little bit loud and echoey, I apologize. But we'll try and make it work. Yeah, so there's a lot of excitement at the RNC right now. There's a lot of, obviously, with the recent attempted assassination of Donald Trump, that is the major focus of the conference right now. But there's still a lot of talk about other issues, particularly cryptocurrency. I've had the chance to attend a blockchain event yesterday, and I'll be returning today, that's focusing on how the blockchain and cryptocurrency can be pushed forward under a potential second Trump administration. So I've had the chance to speak to tech developers, venture capitalists, people within the field of cryptocurrency that I'm not necessarily an expert in, but they were able to tell me their expectations for what can be done for the industry if there's a big Republican victory at the end of this year. I was able to listen to, his name was Chris Giancarlo. He was the former chairman of the, I think it was the Futures Commodity Agency. So sorry, off the top of my head, I don't.
Yeah, Commodities Future Trading Commission. Yeah.
Yes, and so he acted as the chairman under Donald Trump, and he is an expert in cryptocurrency, and he was explaining how the GOP and the Trump administration has shown enthusiasm and has shown to have a desire to push forward the crypto agenda. The GOP platform was released recently, and it talked about pulling back the Biden administration's regulations on cryptocurrency. It talked about enshrining Bitcoin mining rights. It talked about preventing the creation of a centralized digital bank. All of these are popular among a lot of crypto experts. And what I think is interesting is, for a lot of America, for a lot of the GOP and a lot of Republican voters, the big concern over this election is really the legal drama of President Trump. It's the divisiveness in the country. But when you speak to these tech people, they're focused on what the Republican Party can do for the technology industry, which I think is which is interesting, but that makes sense. And so yeah, I think there's great optimism for what can be done to deregulate and free up innovation, keeping crypto innovation in America and not sent overseas. I don't know if that really makes sense, but yeah, that's been my observations on the ground here.
So let's just talk here just a quick moment before we turn to our panel of crypto experts. So one of the points that we were observing is that crypto is one of the issues on which the parties, one of the technology and telecommunications issues on which the parties are the most apart, right? And I'm just wondering, do you sense that people are kind of leaning into this? I mean, it was actually a part of the platform. I mean, this was a story that you wrote last week that of the two tech issues enshrined in the GOP platform, one was crypto and one was AI. And you just kind of reflect on that story you wrote and whether you've heard people kind of talk about it in that way because it's now part of the platform, so to speak.
Yeah, I from the people I've spoken to, I certainly get the vibe they would rather a Republican administration returning than a continuation of the Biden administration. Giancarlo, who I mentioned earlier, called the Biden administration objectively hostile towards cryptocurrency development. So there's definitely, but there is also, I think there is people are hedging their language a little bit because it's almost as equally as likely that Biden will be reelected and his that administration's approach to cryptocurrency will continue. So there's definitely a leaning. Well, I mean, I'm at the RNC, so obviously a lot of people here have a Republican leaning, but there's the GOP's emphasis on deregulation is certainly popular among the people I've spoken to. And also, I should quickly mention JD Vance's pick as Trump's running mate was embraced by a lot of the people I've spoken to because JD Vance has a history of speaking positively towards cryptocurrency and its ability to give financial sovereignty to the people, which is sort of in line with what he stands for. So yeah, I think there's great optimism for that partnership, Trump and Vance.
Great. No, wonderful. Let's go to the statements from our panel, and then we'll maybe have a quick final thoughts for you, Joel, before we let you go to cover other technology and crypto related events in Milwaukee. So Jennifer, from your perspective as someone who's followed this issue kind of day in and day out, presumably for many years, what are you seeing? Catch us up on the last 2 years, but also catch us up on this month. Like, what's your perspective on all of the attention that the tech industry is showing towards crypto right now?
Well, thanks for having me here today to talk, Drew. It's fantastic to join this group. And I think Joel did a fantastic job of setting the stage for what's happening both now at the convention, but also what's been happening the past couple of months. What we've been seeing are the headlines are all about how the GOP is all for crypto. But what I want to do is pull us back a little bit and talk a little bit more in detail about what I view as more of the whole story. In part because it's not hard to be more pro-crypto than the Biden administration has been. The Biden administration has waged war against digital assets through, and not exclusively through, the Securities and Exchange Commission. The financial regulators have been very harsh on crypto, both in terms of enforcement and in guidance, or in refusing to give guidance. And against that backdrop, we've seen increasing support for crypto by Republicans. That support has built on pockets of support that have existed for crypto for years. Kind of looking back, there have always been pockets of support in the GOP for kind of friendliness towards crypto. But the last Trump administration wasn't one that we would have described as pro-crypto. Indeed, Trump himself had been pretty critical of crypto. He's now changed his course, becoming vocally more pro-crypto, and the GOP, as Joel pointed out, has embraced crypto in its platform. which is a bit of an unusual move given how kind of niche the idea of digital assets is when you think about a party platform. Party platforms tend to focus on big picture issues, the issues that affect, kitchen table politics. Crypto is important for a select group of voters, but it doesn't tend to be the one that is striking, Thanksgiving table disputes among family members, except for a few Thanksgiving tables. So Trump's move here and the GOP adding it to the platform is a bit of a culmination of what's become the rank and file view of crypto in the GOP, which has resulted in strong support for recently passed crypto-friendly legislation in Congress. The House of Representatives passed a crypto market structure bill called FIT 21 about a month and a half ago, and both the House and Senate passed a resolution of disapproval of a Securities and Exchange Commission accounting bulletin that affected crypto. Biden had to go so far as to veto that, which is, it doesn't just take Republican support to get things through the House and Senate these days. I think the long and the short of it is that translating all of this support into action is ultimately a lot more complicated. Beyond a simple statement of support for crypto innovation, there's a range of views in the GOP about how to regulate crypto, how to integrate crypto with the traditional financial system, and how to integrate crypto into the anti-illicit finance framework. How this all shakes out was pretty up in the air, especially given that one of the major players in this space in the House, Financial Services Committee Chairman Patrick McHenry, is leaving at the end of this Congress. And he has been a major driver in moving crypto legislation through the House of Representatives. Where the House goes from here, either under Republican or Democratic leadership, is also up in the air. There's been a lot of competing proposals on regulation, some that we haven't even seen yet, including one that VP nominee J.D. Vance is supposedly working on. And it's always hard to tell what will end up being an administration priority, even if there ends up being widespread agreement about how to move forward. So support and statements of support are one thing. Action is another. And I'd like to go ahead and put a big asterisk on today's discussion too. I know we're talking about crypto and the Republicans today, but it's important not to lose sight of the fact that there's been a substantial and arguably growing chunk of Democrats who have also taken crypto-friendly stances. So the compare and contrast for crypto might not be simple red and blue. It might be a rather red and others versus the Biden administration specifically. Or perhaps a growing consensus on the right and center against some on the far left. So it's also important to keep in mind that compared to the Biden administration, the bar to be considered crypto-friendly is pretty darn low. Right. Regardless of whether Republicans achieve any sort of lofty crypto regulation goals, a regulatory environment that's no longer actively enforcing against crypto projects or actively discouraging banks from engaging with crypto is friendly by comparison. Mm-hmm. So I look forward to digging in a bit deeper today with everyone here about how we got here and what it might all mean. So I'll leave it at that.
Awesome. No, that's great. That's super great. So Paul, let's turn to you for 4 minutes here.
Sure. So as probably, I think the only person here who does not have a current nonprofit affiliation, I can be sort of much more honest, or I can just be honest about where I'm at. I am a Republican. I am a hardcore partisan, and I'm a huge supporter of President Trump. So for better or worse, that is where my perspective will come from. And one of the, as Jennifer said, Trump's first term was not hugely pro-crypto at all. And I think one of the good things about President Trump is that he allows himself to be influenced by people who take ideas to him that he, he's able to change his mind. And you see J.D. Vance and particularly Vivek Ramaswamy have come into his orbit and have talked to him about this. And so the former President Trump, his stances compared to, the candidate now, making purely very pro crypto statements, even getting into specifics about saying, being against the CBDC, being very pro Bitcoin mining, and talking at the Libertarian Convention, making again appeals to that crowd about being very pro crypto. I think is a huge development and a positive development, and it's a credit to President Trump, that candidate Trump now, that he is so willing to adapt and change his mind when he encounters sort of good arguments on the other side. So that's where really I'm at. I'm not going to talk that long. I think that Jennifer touched on the AML, anti-money laundering part of this. This is a huge thing, not only for crypto, but for all of banking, that this is really an oppressive regime that does not allow for a lot of innovation at all. And also the energy expenditure part of Bitcoin that is related, in my view, to the whole ESG movement, and how these things are going to be, I think, things that the government will kind of, even really regardless of whether Trump gets back in or not, are going to be things that the administrative state is going to use to tamp down Bitcoin and the enthusiasm for it, through sort of sounding alarms about the energy expenditure part of how it actually works in the consensus protocol. And so I think I'm just going to stop there, and I look forward to any questions from you, Drew. Thank you for inviting me to this, and thank you to the other panelists, and I look forward to what everyone has to say.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Let's go to Sarah, and then we'll open it up. I've got questions for Joel and to lead into everyone else. So go ahead, Sarah.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here, Drew. Yeah, we co-authored a paper. Drew really is an expert at the fairness doctrine and First Amendment issues, and so I was happy to collaborate on that law review article. I learned a lot from it. So an introduction to myself and TPI. We've been in crypto policy and blockchain policy for a while. So I dug up one of our coins. So I minted an ERC20 coin for us, TPIX, in 2019 for our summer conference. So you can see, like, for our conference attendees, we gave out these paper wallets. So there's like a private key and a public key. And so we have like 10,000 TPIX on the Ethereum blockchain. That was 2019. So that's 5 years ago. And so that was like the first wave of all the crypto excitement. And then now, 5 years later, we're here with just a more mature ecosystem. We've seen, booms and busts. There's like, I guess it's a winter now. I don't know if it's considered a winter, but you definitely see more regulation, more litigation has been playing out, and legislation. So as an economist and policy analyst, it's really interesting to watch how everything unfolds. And so the Biden executive order of 2022 was kind of a big statement of, let's look at 10 different reports from the different agencies, get more information about blockchain and crypto from perspectives of like all the different federal agencies. There were some like parts of that EO that folks didn't like openness towards research for a central bank digital currency. Although footnote, from when we were talking to Federal Reserve economists, I think it's always been like a research topic. I'm not sure how serious they've been about minting the CBDC for the US dollar. But I think for the current platform and legislation, there's a very clear line that, the Trump administration does not want, and I guess Tom Emmer, a ban on a CBDC, like no question about it. So that to me is not that controversial, but I can see how folks are contrasting the US policy to China and other countries around the world who are issuing central bank digital currencies that are not anonymous. And so from my perspective, it's interesting to watch how things are unfolding. And then for this particular cycle and the platform currently, what's interesting to see is the crypto industry is kind of putting more money into super PACs this round compared to prior election cycles. So I think there's like $160 million in one super PAC from crypto, and then Elon Musk is pledging 45 million a month, and then A16Z, I think they're in like the double-digit millions of giving, and they said they're going to donate more. Just as a little bit of a skeptic, I feel like it's a little bit of opportunistic rent seeking right now. The podcast from A16Z came out this week, so after the assassination attempt and after it's kind of clear, where things are headed. And then also I was just thinking back, the crypto investment funds, there've been like $40 billion, I think, in venture capital funds in crypto since 2021-ish. And so those funds, I don't know how much return they're getting yet. So they definitely have an interest in getting a return on their investments. And so as a little bit of a political economist, skeptic, I wonder how much of this is just pure rent seeking. Like, let's get policy that benefits our industry, which is not controversial. I mean, every industry wants that. But in terms of like openness to new technology, digital currency, AI, I think technology marches ahead. So, and then we've also seen, a lot of the bad actors getting washed out. So maybe that's although we haven't seen Tether really audited yet, but the cycle has gone through some of these insolvent exchanges. So maybe now is a good time for stablecoin regulation and clarity with SEC, CFTC regulation, and then maybe just tying up, clarifying better the broker and exchange division and AML KYC rules, and then state level rules as well. And now we also have Bitcoin ETFs, and so it's an interesting time to be watching all the development.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much. So lots of things to talk about here. So the one I want to start with is, again, let's just get quick questions for Joel, and then we'll excuse him. But Joel, I think, seeing the venture capitalist class kind of pile on in support of Trump, literally in the last week and a half, both slightly before, but also immediately after, as the assassination attempt, as Sarah has mentioned, is kind of just startling, right? So, for example, David Sachs, the venture capitalist and one of the co-hosts of the All In podcast, I mean, he's been talking a lot about this. I think he spoke like Monday at the convention, right? And crypto is a leading issue, right? Mark Andreessen, I mean, I never thought of him as a Trump Republican, but he endorsed the former president, and of course Elon Musk as well earlier this week. So Joel, could you just speak to kind of like, are we seeing a new political constituency, the Silicon Valley venture capitalists, and is crypto like the one and only issue, or like what are you sort of hearing at the convention about the role that VCs are playing in this convention and political cycle?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna just speak a little bit of my opinion in that I get the impression, like Sarah said, I do think a big part of it is maybe seeing the writing on the wall. You've noticed big moments where opinion polling has swayed in favor of Trump has been when a lot of these tech guys have come out in support of the former president. For example, I remember during Trump and Biden's debate, which a lot of people did not think went very well for Biden. That's when Bill Ackman, who's a big hedge fund manager, came out in support of Trump. And as Sarah was saying, just after this assassination attempt, all of a sudden, all these people are pledging money to his campaign. So I do think that's a big part of it, is seeing the writing on the wall. But also, yeah, a lot of these guys I've spoken to, not to say they are single issue voters, that I'm not saying that is the case, but their expertise, their field is business, it's investment, it's crypto. And so whoever's favoring those policies, they're going to gravitate towards that, regardless of maybe what they think of the candidate as a person. And at the end of the day, you know, whatever you think of Trump, it's also about Trump's team, who's around him. JD Vance is popular amongst a lot of these people. That's only bolstered their support for the Trump presidency. And yeah.
Quick reactions from Jennifer, Paul, and Sarah on the VC angle on this, and then we'll come back to Joel and close out his thoughts. Does anyone want to weigh in on this?
Well, I would just say maybe a lot of this stuff has been a long time coming. Like, you know, this Israel thing, Israel Hamas has sort of brought some people out into making more political positions. Some of these more well-known people, and other world events. So maybe this is just kind of the culmination of things that have been coming for maybe the last 12 months.
Okay. Joel, anything else you'd like to say kind of about the dynamic and the vibe? The event you went to was on blockchain yesterday. I think it's continuing. You're going to be over there. What are you expecting there to be more talk and more reporting on Broadband Breakfast on this topic later today, Joel?
Yeah, so I'll probably, they're all this week they're hosting these blockchain events, because in ways of technology, AI and cryptocurrency are the two, you know, at the forefront of discussion at the moment. So that's probably what I'll be covering a lot of through to the end of this week. I'm not necessarily an expert on it, but I'm sort of learning it on the fly with these people. But yeah, I do think it's interesting that this issue is because, you know, because cryptocurrency is maturing, things have changed so much even since the first Trump administration, let alone before that. This issue is only getting bigger and bigger and gaining more and more attention. It's not a coincidence that the blockchain and cryptocurrency is like one of the only major tech presentations they're doing here at the RNC. So yeah, so stay tuned for more of that.
Well, thank you, Joel. We're going to continue for another 28 minutes, our conversation, but we'll excuse you and continue with the rest of our panel. So take care, Joel, and thanks for being here with us.
Thank you. So
let me pose a question raised by one of our three panelists about the Biden administration. And I think it was Jennifer, you referred to the or maybe it was Sarah, I apologize, the 2022 executive order. Could the three of you speak to the Biden administration in particular? And again, maybe putting aside whether it's Republicans or Democrats, but Biden administration has clearly had an animus against crypto. To what do you trace that, and how has that manifested itself? Jennifer first.
Oh, to what do I trace it? Well, that's a difficult question, to where I'm going to go to trace it. But I think the executive order itself was interesting because a lot of it facially was just asking for research. There were some biases in the executive order, but for the most part, the executive order laid out a plan of trying to get individual agencies to weigh in on their own expertise. And what came out of that were an awful lot of different views from different agencies. They all have different perspectives. Sometimes there were more critical pieces on crypto, sometimes there were less. And you would really have to walk through each individual agency view to figure out exactly where each agency felt crypto was useful, not useful, dangerous, beneficial. You take your pick. But when you look at the administration's kind of tact as a whole, what we see is, I would say, a lot of negative language coming out of the agencies that are at the forefront of enforcement on this topic, on the Securities and Exchange Commission in particular, the banking regulators as well. But it's not a monolith. You've gotten more positive remarks out of the Commodities Future Trading Commission. The chair there has been more open to crypto. Query whether that's because he thinks it's going to extend the agency's jurisdiction quite a bit, or whether it's another motivation on that part. So some of the concerns coming out of the Biden administration are related specifically to kind of a concern with financial stability and keeping guardrails around the government's ability to control money. That is a lot of what we hear from the Elizabeth Warren wing of the party, who has been influential in picking personnel for the Securities and Exchange Commission and some of these other regulators. So I would say the cryptocurrency industry also didn't do itself any particular favors heading into 2022 with the collapse of FTX, with a number of scandals, with a number of, let's say, issues that don't always make it clear up front why the industry is good for innovation, or if this is innovation that we would like to have. So let's say the Biden administration is maybe not a monolith on the topic, but certainly the headline grabbing activities coming out of the Biden administration are very negative in the crypto space. A lot of concern that, so what if the United States is falling behind on crypto? What if the rest of the world is heading forward? We don't want that here anyway, is kind of their through line.
Thanks for that added texture on the not a monolith. What is your perspective, Paul?
Yeah, just adding on to that, I would put this down to two people, Gary Gensler and Elizabeth Warren. I remember before Mr. Gensler was nominated and confirmed, he has and I'm sure you can still get it, a online course on crypto that he did at MIT, and I watched every single one of them, and I really liked the guy. And I would have certainly taken a class with him, and then he sort of got in to his position as chair of the SEC and has just kind of gone wild with enforcement actions and not clear guidance. And the times that the SEC has tried to give guidance, it's just made everything worse, as Commissioner Hester Peirce has alluded to repeatedly.
Can you just give a quick example of that? Like, how has guidance gone wrong?
Sure. So in 2019, they came out with what was supposed to be a guidance for potential crypto issuers. And, this was used the Howey test as a basis. And I remember I just have one line from Commissioner Peirce's response to that, where she said something to the effect of, where the Howey test has 4 tests, this guidance now has 37. And no one who, maybe if you're a crypto lawyer or maybe if you're a lawyer who's very well versed in this stuff, you would be able to figure this out. But most people aren't going to be able to figure it out, much less even the Howey test itself. So, this has been the direction. There have been, as Jennifer pointed to, some contrary voices, but this has been the direction that the Biden administration took from the start with the nomination of Gary Gensler, and nothing's going to change their personnel's policy, as we've been repeatedly alluding to, and nothing's going to change until that changes.
Thanks. Sarah, do you want to add anything to this discussion here?
I think part of it's interesting, the 2022 EO, that was pre-FTX, I guess. So a lot of things changed after the whole FTX implosion. And I think and then that with other enforcement actions have shown, that it is an immature ecosystem. So hopefully now it's more mature. So, basic things like commingling of consumer assets with exchange assets, or Celsius's bankruptcy, and then Gemini also has a fraud case right now. So, and Uniswap had a hacking incident. So these are all kind of marks of a nascent industry that is trying to do financial services compared to the traditional system that has had 100 years of regulation and compliance. And, you can argue that the compliance costs and bureaucracy on the traditional system is what makes it slow and not innovative. But that's also kind of an outcome of all the harms that have happened in the past to consumers. So you're kind of seeing this in between, like the industry has a lot of potential, but also needs to be regulated as well.
So in my listening to podcasts and reading about tech policy, I mean, I don't think it's unfair to say that the mainstream view that I hear is that, crypto is kind of a bunch of fraudulent activities, right? And a lot of people, and sort of, again, you've just checked off like a half dozen or more incidences of fraud, implosion, of other, again, and I'm not saying that it is, I'm just reporting this view, which is colored by a lot of incidences of bad behavior. And so given all of that, it is a little stark and startling that this VC class has just come out so strongly about this and made crypto kind of a single-handedly a big tech policy issue for innovators and the like. And I just, again, for Jennifer and for Paul, what do you attribute these kind of incidents, shall we call them, of the last 2.5 years, right? Do you kind of looking back see them as being bad actors or their failures in regulation or why is the market for crypto basically in the tank still, right? What are your thoughts on that, Jennifer, Paul?
I want to take that somewhere you were going and then kind of switched. So I'll come back to that question because I didn't think there were a lot of bad actors, and there's always bad actors in the space. But what I think has changed a lot and is an important consideration for the VC class, for the political parties generally, is that the kind of the geopolitical view on crypto has changed substantially over the course of the past 5 years. Whereas, the late 2010s, crypto was a niche issue, it was growing. And there were questions about how it should be regulated. In 2024, we're seeing major jurisdictions having rolled out crypto regulatory frameworks, the European Union, a lot of Middle Eastern countries, Japan, the UK. And that's a sign to the United States that digital assets and crypto are not going to just disappear and are something that should probably be thought about seriously in terms of how we regulate it, but B, failing to do so is a potential competitiveness issue for the United States. So that raises a bunch of different questions than were raised in 2009 when Bitcoin started, or in 2015 to 17 when we were going through the ICO phases. It's just a very different question now in terms of what does the United States need to do to take advantage of this industry that other parts of the world have decided should be allowed to operate under their rules. We'll look at our rules as well.
Yeah.
But it means that crypto and digital assets are not a passing fad that the government can ignore regulation on. I do think, as Sarah's mentioned, the industry has been maturing. I think you have a whole host of different interplays here. There are a lot of bad actors. I would say bad actors tend to be a more prominent portion of a smaller industry as it's growing than as it is going to be in the future, as we've seen legitimate use cases growing and interest in regular people and and parts of the traditional financial service in using crypto technology as well. Maturation is a process, and that process is not just the government's responsibility here as well. If the industry doesn't keep out bad actors itself, it's not going to find a way for itself to thrive either.
Okay. No, thank you, Paul.
Yeah, I would say, don't steal customers' funds. Don't take customers' funds and use them for things that you told them you weren't going to use them for. You don't really need to have an MBA to figure that out, right? And so all of these centralized entities that have gotten in trouble have done fraudulent things that everyone knows is wrong and has always been wrong, and they should all be fully prosecuted for that. You know, as to the VCs, I just read Chris Dixon's great book, Read, Write, Own, which talks about the next phase of the internet and how it's going to be potentially bottom up instead of top down. And so I do think, to Sarah's point earlier, there's a bit of self-interest here where you have these VCs that are wanting to fund new projects, and they are being limited by the Google, Facebook oligopoly, if I said that right. And so they want to find ways to sort of compete with that with new projects so they can make money. And so that was a huge part of that good book. But you know, I'm all for it, and for these VCs and these other high net worth individuals coming in and funding these new projects and making it as open as possible so they can compete in the marketplace and have the best one win.
We have a question from Dan Smith here, and I want to broaden it a little bit. He asks, please explain how a central bank crypto, you know, I guess a CBDC, right? Central bank digital coin, right? How that would limit money laundering, his question. But I just want to ask how it would work. Like, what's the point of it? What are your perspectives on it? What is the industry's perspective on a central bank digital currency? Let's start with you, Sarah, on this one.
Yeah, and I just want to make a note that, like, I don't think I might sound like skeptical or negative towards crypto, but I'm actually, you know, I think I'm positive on it. I just think that there are intermediaries that need, you know, we can't trust fully, as it's not decentralized unless you're really, you know, getting your Bitcoin on your, you know, on your own drive. And even ledgers aren't decentralized either. So, you know, you'll always have these intermediaries, and it's hard to know. But, you know, Circle and Coinbase, you know, they're very serious about compliance and security. And so, you know, there are other groups like so there's a whole apparatus of like security and compliance that needs to be built, I think, for the crypto ecosystem to grow. Depending on how you see, you know, if you're a Bitcoin maxi and then, you know, decentralization is the way to go, you still have intermediaries for consumers to be able to interact with the chain. So I think in that whole context, there has to be trust with institutions, and that's where regulators come into play. I know, like, I was trading a lot in crypto, and there's a lot of wash trading. There's a lot of front running, and you don't know as a consumer who you're swapping with or what's happening on the exchange side. And so, yeah, I think for folks that have been in it, like, it's like thousands of dollars, like, you don't know where it's going. And so I think for those concerns, it is a balance. Like, you know, consumers want to be able to trust crypto, but then it's hard for a consumer to know, like, who to trust. So I think that is the backdrop of
right. Well, sorry to be so one binary, so to speak. Good or bad thing? Should there be a central bank digital currency, Sarah?
Yeah. Okay. So for CBDCs, there are a lot of concerns. If you have coins with the Federal Reserve, they can track your dollars. And so there are people who say, you know, you can add a layer of anonymity, but the dollar, your bills have a serial code on it. And so if you transact with a digital dollar, the bank will be able to track your dollars. And so, I mean, that's a real concern for folks who don't trust big government. Right.
Okay. Jennifer, Paul, what are your thoughts on the central bank digital currency?
No, don't need it, don't want it. There's a lot of potential issues depending on how it's designed in terms of the impact that it could have on the banking system and intermediation. But I'll just come back down to the two basic points. One is the one that Sarah already raised, and that is government surveillance opportunity. Regardless of the design here, it opens a giant door towards the government being able to track all money spent by people using that. And that is, I would say, an enormous problem and a very unwelcome infringement upon our civil liberties. The other point that I would make is it's not at all clear what such an infringement on our civil liberties would be buying. The case for the central bank digital currency is often made in terms of, well, you need digital money to be able to spend it on the internet. That's what crypto's for. Well, you can say, sure, that's what crypto is for. There's private competition here in terms of stable coins. We do have, digital access through debit cards and others.
Just to be clear, a stable coin, as I understand it, is a digital currency, a privately run digital currency that's intending to mirror the central bank's,
It's pegged.
rate, right? But it's not run by the central government in the way a central bank digital currency would be, correct?
No, a stable coin is not run by the central bank. Stable coins are private competitors that provide a token that is meant to keep the same value as a dollar.
Yeah.
So it's not at all clear what that sort of massive infringement of civil liberties that I object to on its own would be buying in terms of any sort of benefit out of a central bank digital currency.
In other words, we have it through a stable coin in the private market. There's no need for a central bank digital currency. Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I concur with that. These things are evil. They should never see the light of day. And it's not just the surveillance part. It's the surveillance and then what they can do with that, right? So they can say, look, you're buying a firearm, you're buying marijuana, you're buying something that the government doesn't like. We're not going to let you do that. Or you made that transaction and we're going to reverse it. So I wrote a policy paper on this a few years ago, and it's not only that they will be able to review everything they have, like for instance, what's going on in China now, but it's a huge leap to the other bad aspects of the Chinese society with like social credit and that sort of thing.
Okay. We have another great question from John Rowe. Regulation of new technology is typically a slow unfolding process. He's asking, what is the possibility of using blockchain to create secure, reliable voting systems? And I'm going to add on to that question. I've been interested in the blockchain from the perspective of documents and signatures and so forth. So just like, what are your thoughts on the blockchain as a technology above and beyond finance for uses? Does anyone want to take that?
I'll just say I'm writing a book real quick. I am writing a book on this, and there are huge implications for not only finance but American culture and how information is passed, how value is passed, how people receive and give entertainment and media, and all of these things can potentially be decentralized, and it's a huge and fascinating world that is coming.
Yeah,
Jennifer.
and I'll say I focus on financial policy, so I don't get as deep on other uses of the blockchain. But I will say that kind of this lack of clarity, uncertainty about the way that it is regulated now through the Securities and Exchange Commission kind of slows down development in other places where there's this general view that if you do anything that looks blockchainy, you might be in fear of having the SEC come and take a look at you. There are applications of the blockchain that are much further away from that, but
Right.
There's this gray area that just the overbearance of the financial regulators plays some role in slowing down potential uses of the technology in other places, which is another reason why we really need to get the financial regulation of this right, so that it's not over spilling into other technological innovation.
Well, in our last Broadband Breakfast event in person, Jennifer, the one you participated in, I do remember a lot of our discussion was about like which bucket does it fall in? Is it a Securities and Exchange Commission issue? Is it a Commodities Future Trading Commission issue, CFTC, or is it a banking regulation issue, or some combination of all three of those? Where has the debate gone on that particular question, Jennifer, since 2.5 years ago? And is there any more of a consensus that, you can structure a blockchain/crypto product that falls in the jurisdiction of CFTC or falls in the jurisdiction of a banking regulator as opposed to the SEC?
So I said the debate is still happening. Most of the conversation that has been taking place on Capitol Hill has been between does jurisdiction fall for the CFTC or the SEC. The banking regulators have been more involved in kind of, I don't want to say ancillary, but not that direct question. But I think that it's kind of important to keep in mind here that where you're dealing with blockchain-based tokens that don't have any intent to be financial products, it's still not at all clear that the SEC doesn't have an interest. There's been a couple of lawsuits filed by companies who were looking to do blockchain-based perks or tokens that were like loyalty rewards. They filed lawsuits specifically looking for kind of declarative action by the SEC, saying that the SEC is not going to be involved, that it's not a security and the SEC has no business being there. But the fact that these smaller companies that are interested in experimenting with blockchain technology feel the need to go so far as to sue the SEC proactively in order to be able to take this technological development step is disheartening. And I think just kind of continued proof that the debate here is not just SEC versus CFTC. It's a much bigger question of how do we think about technology and how do we ensure that the right regulations are impacting the right uses of that technology.
Any other reactions to that before we kind of close out with giving you each a chance to respond?
I would just say real quickly, one of the problems when you start getting into securities world, and that's the sort of world I am in right now, is they're so restrictive on tradability, right? And so you have to be able to trade things without Big Brother looking at you. And for instance, the Jobs Act, which I work with, came out in 2012, and these were supposed to be very open, and to a certain extent, they have been open and allowed regular people to invest in startups and stuff. And they made them freely tradable after a year from the federal perspective, but then all the states came in. And so you can't really do anything with these units, be it stock or whatever type of security. And so that's one reason I think we have to get this out of securities land.
Mm-hmm. Well, we want to give each of you a chance to maybe offer some final thoughts on this. We do have another question here. I'm not completely sure I understand real world asset markets capitalized, but if anyone wants to tackle that question about what are the political implications for real world asset markets, please do. Let's go ahead and close out in the same order we started. Jennifer, Paul, and Sarah, what do you take of the renewed interest on crypto from the Republicans, but also what is the future of this issue space in the next 6 months, year, and beyond? Jennifer.
Well, I'll give 20 seconds on real world asset markets because I think that my answer to that would be very similar to the one that I just gave, which is it highly depends on what real world asset we're talking about and who the regulators should be on that front. I think the tokenization and digitization in those spaces is going to continue, but I think that there are regulatory headwinds depending on what you're talking about. But say kind of the broader picture, where are we headed from here is I think that, say, Biden administration notwithstanding, between the Republicans and a good block of Democrats, we're seeing a lot more friendliness towards working through these issues about regulation rather than simply trying to regulate or not regulate the digital assets and related, say, crypto issues out of existence. So I'm hopeful, regardless of who wins the White House in 2024, that the United States writ large is going to really wrestle with these questions in order to bring it in line with the rest of the world that is looking towards digitization and the next wave in terms of, say, crypto and digital assets. We're behind. I don't think it's too late to catch up, but I think there's a growing recognition that we need to get moving.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, I didn't really see the real world assets thing, but one thing I would add to that may be related is our NFTs, which allow real world assets to be tracked, to have their provenance tracked, and so I think NFTs are going to be a huge sort of bridge between the online world and the real world in a way that has never really happened before. And so I'm very bullish on this. People that are in my camp and can see the sort of the potential new world that is out there. We have a chance to influence it right now. I mean, none of this stuff is set in stone. From if you're a coder, if you're a lawyer, if you're a policy person, all of this stuff is really up in the air right now. So this is it's a really exciting time to be sort of engaged in this and to get your voice in there and to try to influence where all of this is going.
Great. Thanks for your energy and enthusiasm, Paul. Sarah, the final word.
I think one thing I'd like to see and look forward to seeing is more stablecoin legislation work. Just because, if the dollar pegs are, secure and audited and compliant, then you can trust digital currencies to be a medium of exchange more than a store of value, which is kind of what it's used for right now. And so, I look forward to seeing that and not worrying about the dollar peg. So there are a lot of stable coins out there, but how much does the whole ecosystem rely on certain pairs of trades like USDT and BTC or whatever it is right now that are keeping up those price levels. So I think in terms of the monetary aspects of digital currency, that would be something I'm going to keep watching.
Well, it's been a wonderful discussion. Thank you to Joel Layton, reporter at Broadband Breakfast. Continue to look for his stories from Milwaukee, including on blockchain and cryptocurrency. And of course, our panel of experts, Jennifer Schlepp, Paul Jossi, and Sarah O. Lamb. On behalf of each of our speakers, I'm Drew Clark, and we'll see you next Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.